This is a story you can listen to as you drift off to sleep. Detective Arthur Wren was a man whose career had been shaped by quiet tenacity. He solved the cases most others left cold. His voice was like rain tapping gently on an old window pane. Soft, steady, comforting in a way that made people speak to him, even when they didn't want to. Arthur lived alone in a small apartment above a bakery. The ever-present scent of fresh bread and pastries filled his home, becoming the quiet backdrop of his life. He was a solitary man, not by choice, but by the slow passage of years spent chasing the fading footprints of criminals. Friends had drifted away, family had grown distant, but Arthur had made peace with his world. He had his work, and in the quiet moments, he would hum to himself as he pieced puzzles together. It was on a Monday morning when the call came in. Detective Wren had just poured his coffee and was flipping through the morning paper when the shrill ring of his phone cut through the stillness. "Wren," he answered, his voice calm. "Detective, it's Marlowe. We have a situation down at the docks. You might want to see this." Arthur finished his coffee in one steady sip, set the cup down, and grabbed his coat. The scene was tucked away on the edge of the city, near the warehouses by the water. Gray mist rolled in from the bay, making the world feel distant and smudged around the edges. The flashing lights of patrol cars painted streaks of red and blue across the damp pavement. Arthur ducked under the police tape and met Officer Marlowe, who stood near the loading dock, his hands buried in his pockets. "Morning, sir. It's not like the usual ones," Marlowe said, his brow creased with unease. "A dock worker found him early this morning." Arthur approached the scene. The victim, a man in his 40s, lay sprawled near a stack of wooden crates. His eyes were closed, and his face was oddly peaceful. Arthur noticed a symbol carved into the man's palm, a perfect circle with 3 lines radiating from the center, like a compass. "No ID on him yet," Marlowe said quietly. "No sign of a struggle, nothing missing. It's clean, too clean." Arthur crouched beside the body, examining the symbol. "Did you find anything else?" Marlowe handed him a small evidence bag containing a folded piece of paper. Arthur carefully unfolded it, revealing a sentence written in neat, deliberate handwriting. "North, south, east, west. The game begins." Arthur stared at the words for a long moment. "The game begins, huh?" Marlowe nodded. "We'll canvass the area. See if anyone saw anything." "Good. Bring the body in. And make sure we get a full sweep of this place. I want to know who's been here in the last 24 hours. Arthur took his time with the scene. Every detail mattered. The lack of disturbance around the body, the deliberate carving, the carefully folded note. It wasn't random. It wasn't rushed. By the afternoon, Arthur was back in his office, staring at the note pinned to his board. The symbol nagged at him. It felt like a message, one meant specifically for someone who would notice it. He called Marlowe in. "Anything from the canvas?" Marlowe shook his head. A couple of dock workers saw a man in a dark coat leave the area early this morning. No face, no vehicle. Just disappeared into the fog. "What about the victim?" "We're still working on identification. No wallet, no phone. Nothing in the system yet." Arthur leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled in thought. "Start digging into any recent missing persons reports. Focus on the last 48 hours. And I want you to run this symbol. See if it matches any gang insignias, cult markings, anything." Marlowe nodded and left, Arthur's days were now filled with quiet, deliberate interviews. He spoke with dock workers, truck drivers, shop owners who worked the morning shift near the docks. Most had nothing useful to share. Some had vague recollections of a tall figure moving through the mist. None could describe a face. Each night, Arthur would return to his apartment, the weight of the unsolved case pressing against his chest. The bakery below would already be closed, the streets outside empty except for the occasional passing car. He would sit by his window, sip lukewarm coffee, and stare at the city as it quietly settled into itself. 2 days later, Marlowe burst into Arthur's office, a thin file in his hand. "We got a name. The victim's fingerprints came back. Name's Daniel Mercer, warehouse foreman. Clean record." Arthur frowned. Any connection to anyone who might have wanted him dead? Not that we can see. He lived alone, quiet life. No debts, no known enemies. Arthur picked up the photo of Daniel Mercer, studying his face. Someone went to a lot of trouble to send a message with his death. We need to find out why him. Start with his co-workers, friends, anyone he spoke to regularly. Arthur personally visited Daniel's workplace. The air inside the warehouse smelled of damp wood and oil. The workers were on edge, their eyes flitting nervously as Arthur approached them one by one. He spoke first to James Keller, Daniel's closest colleague. "James, how well did you know Daniel?" "Pretty well, sir. We worked together for years. He was reliable. Kind of kept it to himself, but he always showed up." "Did he ever mention anything unusual? Anyone bothering him?" James shook his head, but his hesitation did not go unnoticed. "You hesitated. What is it?" James rubbed the back of his neck. "It's probably nothing. A couple of weeks ago, Daniel said he thought someone was following him after work. He laughed it off, said it was probably his imagination." "Did he describe the person?" "No. Just said he saw someone hanging around outside the warehouse a few times." Arthur wrote this down carefully. "Why didn't you tell us this sooner?" "I didn't think it mattered." "It does now." Arthur spoke with more workers that day, each one adding small, incomplete pieces to the puzzle. A shadowy figure seen at odd hours. A stranger loitering near the back entrance. Back at the station, Arthur reviewed the CCTV footage from the surrounding blocks. After hours of combing through grainy, fog-obscured recordings, he spotted a man in a long, dark coat, moving steadily through the mist, always just outside the camera's clear range. Arthur replayed the footage again and again, trying to catch any detail that could help. The man never looked at the cameras, never ran, never hurried. The case was beginning to stretch into him. It settled in his bones, a quiet ache that hummed in the background of his thoughts. He was called to a second scene 4 days later. Another victim. Same symbol. Same note. This time, Arthur found something else. A small metal compass left deliberately beside the body. "He's escalating," Arthur said to Marlowe, who stood nearby. "Escalating or getting closer to something," Marlowe replied. Arthur pocketed the compass, its weight oddly significant in his hand. "Start checking for anyone buying these. Maybe he's getting them from somewhere local." As Arthur continued to investigate, his list of potential suspects began to grow. A disgraced geography professor, a street cartographer with a history of mental illness, a survivalist who believed the city was full of secret codes. Each person he met had stories to tell, layers to peel back. Conversations unfolded like slow dances, careful, probing, rich with tension, and each led him further into a maze of possibilities, false starts, and lingering doubts. Arthur met with the geography professor first. Dr. Lionel Vance had been dismissed from his university position years ago for tampering with archaeological evidence. When Arthur entered his small, cluttered apartment, stacks of maps and dusty compasses surrounded the man like a fortress. "Detective Wren," Vance said, his fingers trembling as he adjusted his glasses. "I read about the killings. Tragic." "You studied symbols, Doctor. Seen this one before?" Arthur slid a sketch of the compass symbol across the table. Vance's eyes lingered on it, darkening. "That's not just a compass. It's an old navigation sigil. Sailors believed it pointed toward hidden truths. But the 3 lines, they aren't part of the original design." "What do you make of the addition?" "A modification. Possibly a personal signature. Whoever left it knows how to disguise meaning in plain sight." Arthur probed further. "Did you know Daniel Mercer?" "Never heard of him. And the metal compasses?" Vance shook his head. "Could be purchased anywhere. Tourist shops, antique markets, they're common." Arthur left Vance's apartment with more questions than answers. Next, he tracked down the street cartographer, Ellis Rowe. Ellis was a soft-spoken man who spent his days sketching street maps and selling them from a small stand near the park. His hands twitched as he spoke, his speech scattered. "People think the city's just buildings, but there are patterns, Detective. Repeating angles, paths that mean something." Arthur showed him the symbol. Ellis leaned in, nodding quickly. "It's a directional mark, but not standard. North, south, east, west. But those lines, they're misaligned. They're pointing to specific locations." "What locations?" "I can't tell without a full map overlay. I'd need days to analyze it." Arthur narrowed his eyes. "Did you know Daniel Mercer?" Ellis shook his head, visibly anxious. "Never heard the name." Arthur wasn't sure if he believed him. "You ever sell someone a compass like this?" "I don't sell objects, just maps. If you think of anything else, you call me." The survivalist, Warren Pike, was more difficult to find. Arthur eventually tracked him to a cabin outside the city. Pike was wary, his sharp gaze scanning Arthur as he approached. "You're on my land. What do you want?" "Information about the symbol. About the killings." Pike snorted. "Cities falling apart. Signs are everywhere if you know how to read them." Arthur showed him the compass. "Seen it? Symbols like that?" "Yeah. Been scrawled on alley walls for months. No one pays attention." "Where exactly?" "Back alleys near the old train yard. Painted over, but they keep coming back." Arthur made careful notes. "Do you know Daniel Mercer?" "Never met him." "And the compasses?" "Could have been bought at Belling's Curiosities. Old man sells all kinds of junk." Arthur returned to the city with his leads pointing him toward the train yard and the curiosity shop. He visited Belling's Curiosities, a cramped store filled with clocks, maps, and brass instruments. "Detective Wren, is it? I read about you. Looking for compasses, are we? Ever sell ones like this?" Arthur showed him the metal compass. "Sold a batch of those to a man a few months back. Tall, wore a dark coat. Strange fellow." "Name?" "Never gave one. Paid cash. Anything else about him?" "He asked a lot about the history of the city. Seemed obsessed with old maps." Arthur left the shop with a gnawing feeling in his gut. The picture of the man in the dark coat was slowly coming into focus, but his identity remained elusive. At the train yard, Arthur found faded versions of the same compass symbol spray painted on the walls, some fresh, some old. He paced the alleys, marking locations on a map, connecting the points Ellis Rowe had suggested. The lines formed a shape, a crude map within the city, a pattern only visible when all the symbols were plotted together. Arthur realized he was chasing someone who was not just killing. He was building something, leaving a map that would eventually lead to the killer's true message. Arthur folded the map carefully, tucking it into his coat. The city was whispering to him now, and he was finally beginning to hear it. Detective Arthur Wren was not a man easily rattled, but the case had begun to seep into the quiet corners of his life. The compass sat on his desk, its needle trembling faintly, always pointing north, as if urging him toward something unseen. Marlowe entered, dropping a small stack of papers on Arthur's desk. "We traced the compass," he said, sliding a receipt across. "It was purchased at a small antique shop downtown. The owner remembers selling 3 of them. One's in evidence, the other's unaccounted for." Arthur rubbed his temple, feeling the pull of the unknown. "And the third?" "The third was bought last week, paid in cash. The owner couldn't describe the buyer. Said he wore a dark coat and spoke softly. That's all." Arthur glanced at the compass again. "Did we ever get a hit on that symbol?" Marlowe hesitated. "Not in the usual databases. But one of our consultants in ancient symbology flagged it. Said it's sometimes called the compass rose. Historically used in old navigation charts, sometimes linked to secret societies." Arthur's brow lifted. "Secret societies?" Marlowe gave a half shrug. "Could be nothing. Could be someone playing games." Arthur nodded, absorbing the weight of that. "Bring me everything we have on local groups. Old societies, urban explorers, anyone who might use symbols like this." Marlowe paused at the door. "You really think this is about more than the victims?" Arthur's gaze drifted back to the note pinned on his board. "North, south, east, west. The game begins. I think the victims are just the first move." That night, Arthur visited the antique shop himself. It was tucked away on a side street, its windows cluttered with brass instruments and time-worn maps. The bell chimed as he entered. An elderly man behind the counter looked up, eyes sharp despite his years. "Help you with something, detective?" Arthur's voice was steady, almost kind. "I understand you sold some compasses recently." The man nodded. "Beautiful pieces, all from the same collection." Arthur's fingers brushed one of the old maps. "Do you remember the man who bought the last one?" The shopkeeper's gaze turned thoughtful. "Yes. Soft-spoken. Asked about maps, but not to buy them. Wanted to know about the oldest ones. Ones that showed parts of the city that no longer exist." Arthur's pulse slowed, focused. "Did he say why?" The old man's lips thinned. "Said he was looking for something people had forgotten. Something hidden." Arthur left with more questions than answers. The city, with all its foggy streets and forgotten alleys, suddenly felt like a layered map itself, full of secret routes no longer traveled. The next morning, Marlowe brought another lead. "Remember that street cartographer? The one with a history of strange theories?" "Thomas Bell," Arthur recalled. "What about him?" He disappeared last night, left behind a notebook. You're going to want to see this." Arthur flipped through the notebook, his heart catching on the intricate hand-drawn maps, all centered on the compass symbol. Bell had circled abandoned subway tunnels, derelict buildings, underground access points. On the last page was a scribbled phrase: "The true city lies beneath the streets." Arthur's voice was quiet. "We've been looking in the wrong places." Marlowe leaned in. "You think this is all connected? The victims, the compasses, the old maps?" "I think someone's playing a game that stretches under the surface of the city." Arthur tapped the compass in his pocket. "And I think we've only just started following the path." Marlowe swallowed. "Where do we start?" Arthur's smile was faint, but certain. "We go underground." Detective Arthur Wren moved cautiously through the abandoned subway station, the air thick with dust and echoes. The faint light from their flashlights flickered against the cracked tiles and rusted rails beneath the city. This place, forgotten by time, held the last clue in a deadly game the killer had laid out. "This is it," Arthur said quietly to Officer Marlowe. "The missing point on the map." Marlowe nodded, his grip tight on his flashlight. "Feels like a trap." Arthur didn't answer. Instead, he focused on the shadows. There, near a broken pillar, a figure in a dark coat waited. Calm. Still. "Step into the light," Arthur ordered. The man moved slowly, hands visible but relaxed. His face was gaunt, eyes sharp and cold. "You followed the map," the man said, voice low but clear. "Not many have." Arthur kept his gun steady. "You've been killing people connected to this city's past." "Why?" The man's lips curled in a faint, unsettling smile. "Because the city forgot. People forgot. They walk without direction, blind to what lies beneath." Arthur's voice was steady. "You call this a message? Murdering innocent people." "They weren't innocent," the man said. "Each victim played a part in burying the city's secrets. I'm just unveiling the truth." Marlowe stepped forward. "You're coming with us." The man nodded slowly, as if expecting this. "The last piece is still out there, buried beneath the city's heart." Arthur's eyes narrowed. "Where?" "Under the old town hall," the man said softly. "Where the city's real story sleeps." Back at the station, the interrogation room was dark and cold. The man sat quietly, his gaze never faltering. Arthur leaned in. "Tell me about the victims. What did they know?" "They knew the city's lies," the man replied. "Maps altered, histories erased. I wanted to reveal the patterns, the compass rose that points to the truth." Arthur flipped through his notes, filled with maps and names. "Was anyone helping you? An accomplice?" "No," the man said, "but others keep silent. Fear holds them prisoner." Arthur's mind raced. "If you want this to stop, you need to show me everything." After a pause, the man spoke. "The final truth lies beneath the town hall, in a chamber hidden for decades. That's where this ends." Arthur and Marlowe wasted no time. At the old town hall, they found the hidden entrance beneath the floorboards, exactly where the man had said. They descended into a maze of tunnels, walls covered in faded symbols and names. At the center, a small chamber housed dusty city plans and old documents, proof of a conspiracy to bury the city's history. Arthur held a worn photograph showing past officials, some faces grim and familiar. "This is why the victims died," Arthur murmured. "They tried to hide this." Suddenly, radio crackled. "Detective, Accomplices of the suspect are attacking the building. Arthur's eyes hardened. This isn't just a story about the past. It's a fight for the city's future. The hunt was far from over. Arthur knew the final chapter awaited, where secrets, lies, and violence would collide. The radio crackled urgently in Arthur's ear as he and Marlowe hurried back toward the town hall's entrance. "Detective, they're trying to tear down the support beams. The whole building could collapse." Arthur's heart pounded. "Marlowe, we need backup now. Get the tactical team here immediately." But the culprits weren't ordinary vandals. Arthur recognized the determination behind their destruction. They were desperate to bury the secrets beneath the rubble forever. "Stay close," Arthur ordered, drawing his flashlight and weapon. "We can't let them destroy the evidence." The two men pushed through the dust and shadows, descending once more into the labyrinth beneath the city. The walls echoed with distant shouts and the scrape of metal against stone. Ahead, a narrow corridor led to the chamber where the documents had been found. Arthur's mind raced. If the building collapsed, all proof would be lost. Suddenly, footsteps pounded behind them. "Freeze!" Arthur shouted, but it was too late. A group of masked figures burst from the darkness, wielding crowbars and heavy tools. Marlowe moved quickly, tackling one attacker to the ground. Arthur fired a warning shot, the bullet ricocheting off the tiled walls. "Get out of here," Arthur yelled. "Secure the evidence." A fierce struggle ensued, fists and metal clashing in the cramped space. Arthur's years of experience grounded him. He dodged a swinging crowbar and grabbed the assailant's arm, twisting until the weapon clattered to the floor. But the attackers were relentless. One managed to slam a heavy wrench into Arthur's side. Pain flared, but he gritted his teeth, fighting through it. From above, the distant sound of sirens grew louder. Backup was arriving. The masked figures scattered, disappearing into the tunnels. Arthur and Marlowe secured the chamber as best they could, reinforcing the fragile support beams with what they had on hand. Back on the surface, the police swarmed the area, arresting several accomplices linked to the man in the dark coat. Days later, back in his office, Arthur spread out the recovered documents. The conspiracy was deeper than he'd imagined. Official records altered, evidence erased, a silent cabal protecting the city's darker truths. But the man in the dark coat had been right. The city was built on lies. Arthur sighed and looked out his window. The city bathed in the soft glow of dawn. "The truth is out," he murmured. "Now, it's up to us to decide what to do with it." Detective Arthur Wren sat back in his worn leather chair, the weight of the uncovered documents pressing on his mind like a thick fog. Each page told a story, hidden deals, erased names, and silent betrayals buried deep beneath the city's foundation. Marlowe shuffled in, holding a fresh file. "We found something, sir. A ledger linked to some of the officials in the photos. It lists payments, dates, and names, including a few recent ones." Arthur's eyes narrowed. "Recent? How recent?" "Within the last 6 months. And some names tie back to local business leaders, even city council members." Arthur exhaled slowly. "So, the conspiracy isn't just history. It's alive." They began cross-referencing the ledger with recent activity. Patterns emerged, large sums moving through shadow accounts, sudden changes in property ownership near the docks, and unexplained closures of public records. Arthur picked up his phone. "Get me a meeting with the mayor. It's time to ask some hard questions. The mayor's office was polished, every surface gleaming with power and control. Arthur noticed the subtle tension in the air, a quiet wariness behind the mayor's polite smile. Detective Wren, the mayor greeted. What brings you here today? Arthur wasted no time. The ledger we recovered points to a network of influence. Payments to officials, business leaders, even city council members. This goes beyond murder. There's corruption, cover-ups. I want to know what you're willing to do about it. The mayor's eyes flickered, calculating. Arthur, the city is complex. Sometimes, difficult decisions are necessary to maintain order. Arthur leaned forward. Maintaining order shouldn't mean killing people or hiding the truth. The mayor's smile tightened. Careful, detective. These accusations can destroy reputations. Arthur stood. Destroying truth destroys trust. I'll follow this wherever it leads. Outside, Arthur and Marlowe regrouped. We're up against powerful people, Marlowe said quietly. Arthur nodded. But they're afraid. That's our advantage. Back at the station, Arthur reviewed interviews with the victim's acquaintances. A name kept appearing. Lydia Crane, a historian obsessed with the city's forgotten past. Some said she was eccentric. Others whispered she knew too much. Arthur found her tucked away in a dusty library, surrounded by stacks of old books and newspapers. I've been expecting you, detective, Lydia said without looking up. You know about the killings, more than you think. The compass symbol. It's an old code used by those who wanted to protect the city's secrets. The victims, they stumbled too close. Arthur showed her the ledger. You recognize any names? Lydia scanned the pages, her eyes sharp. Some, yes. And these payments? Bribes to silence. Who's behind it? She hesitated. A council faction determined to rewrite history for profit and power. The docks, the train yards, they're all part of a larger plan. Arthur felt the pieces click together. And the man in the dark coat, a vigilante trying to expose the truth his own way. Arthur left the library with renewed purpose. The city's past and present were entwined in a dangerous dance, and he was caught in the middle. The game was far from over. Arthur sat alone in his office late into the night, the city's distant hum a constant companion. The ledger lay open before him, alongside Lydia Crane's notes and his own scribbled observations. He felt the weight of the hunt pressing down, but a clarity had begun to emerge. The man in the dark coat wasn't just a killer. He was a message, a shadow trying to expose the corruption buried beneath the city's surface. Arthur glanced at a photo of Daniel Mercer, the first victim, a quiet man caught in the crossfire of secrets far beyond his understanding. His phone buzzed sharply. Marlowe, Arthur answered. We've got a lead, Marlowe said, voice low but urgent. The man in the dark coat was spotted near the old railway station tonight. Arthur grabbed his coat. I'm on my way. The railway station was a cavernous relic of the city's past, abandoned and swallowed by shadows. Arthur moved cautiously, senses sharpened. The air was thick with the scent of rust and damp concrete. A flicker of movement caught his eye. A figure in a dark coat stood by the tracks, silhouetted against the faint glow of a distant street lamp. Stop, Arthur called. The figure turned slowly, revealing a gaunt face framed by dark hair. Detective Wren, the man said quietly. I've been expecting you. Arthur took a careful step forward, Why the killings? What do you want? To make the city see the truth, the man replied. To shake the foundation so it can be rebuilt. Arthur's eyes narrowed. You've endangered innocent lives. The man smiled sadly. Sometimes sacrifices must be made for a greater good. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind Arthur. Police, drop your weapon. Arthur turned to see officers, led by Marlowe, closing in. The man in the dark coat didn't resist. He lowered his gaze, accepting the fate he'd set in motion. Back at the station, Arthur sat across from the man. What's your name? Arthur asked. Elias Grant, and the compass symbol, a mark of guidance, of direction toward truth. Arthur leaned in. You think murder is the way to justice? Elias's eyes were steady. In a city built on lies, sometimes you must break the surface to let light in. Arthur felt the weight of those words, heavy and uneasy. But the nightmare was over. For now, the city stirred in uneasy silence the morning after Elias Grant's arrest. Detective Arthur Wren sat at his desk, eyes heavy but alert. The web of lies had been exposed, but the ripple effects were just beginning. Marlowe entered, holding a stack of files. The mayor's office wants a full report. They're worried about the fallout. Arthur nodded slowly. Prepare everything, but I want a copy sent to Lydia Crane. She deserves to know. Marlowe hesitated. You really trust her? Arthur gave a thin smile. She's more part of this than anyone else. Days passed, and the city's undercurrents churned. Media outlets exploded with news of the corruption, of the shadow cabal protecting their interests. Some officials resigned, others went silent. Arthur found himself under pressure, from politicians, from the public, from the weight of justice itself. Yet late one night, a new message appeared at his doorstep. No symbol this time, just a simple note. The game never ends. Arthur's gaze hardened. The fight for truth was far from over. He stood by his window, looking out as the city breathed beneath the moonlight. I'm ready, he whispered. The weeks following Elias Grant's arrest were anything but quiet. Detective Arthur Wren found himself navigating a city still trembling under the weight of revelations. The corruption scandal had cracked open a hidden world, but the shadows remained long and dangerous. One evening, Arthur was reviewing case files when Marlowe burst into the room, face pale. Sir, you need to see this, he said, handing over a folder. Inside were photos of a new crime scene. A body found in an alley near the train yard. The same compass symbol carved into the victim's palm. Arthur's heart sank. The killer, or killers, were still out there. We thought we'd stop this, Arthur murmured, tracing the symbol with a finger. Marlowe looked grim. Looks like someone's continuing the message. Arthur stood abruptly. Then, we haven't finished the game. That night, Arthur returned to the train yard, the chilling sight of the latest murder. The air was thick with the silence, broken only by the distant hum of the city. He traced the lines of graffiti, the compass symbols, the crude maps, connecting them in his mind. A presence stirred behind him. Detective. Arthur spun around. Lydia Crane stepped from the shadows, clutching a worn notebook. They're trying to rewrite history, she said. This isn't just murder. It's war over the soul of the city. Arthur nodded. We need to find who's behind this before more lives are lost. Together they delved deeper into the city's underbelly, following the breadcrumbs left by those desperate to expose or protect the truth. Arthur and Lydia sat across from each other in a dimly lit cafe. Maps and notes sprawled between them like a battlefield. The symbols aren't random, Lydia said, pointing at a series of interconnected markings. They map out key locations tied to the city's darkest secrets. Arthur traced the lines with his finger. Each victim, each symbol. It's a puzzle. But what's the endgame? Lydia's eyes were steady. Power. Control. Whoever's behind this wants to rewrite the city's story. In their image. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden knock on the door. A young courier slipped inside, handing Arthur an unmarked envelope before disappearing back into the night. Arthur opened it slowly. Inside was a single cryptic message. You're closer than you think. Beware the ones you trust. Arthur exchanged a glance with Lydia. The game had changed. The hunter had become the hunted. That night, Arthur returned to his apartment, the note burning a hole in his pocket. He stared out at the city, the blackness beyond the window, a mirror to the mystery he was chasing. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Meet me at the pier. Midnight. Alone. Arthur felt the pull of the unknown, the dangerous promise of answers. He grabbed his coat. The night was far from over. The clock in Arthur's apartment ticked steadily toward midnight. The city outside was shrouded in fog, streetlights casting long, wavering shadows. Arthur pulled on his coat, checked his badge, and stepped into the night. The pier was deserted, the air thick with the scent of salt and rust. Wooden planks creaked beneath his feet as he moved deeper into the darkness. A solitary figure emerged from the fog, a woman, face partially hidden beneath a hood. Detective Wren, she said softly. I have information, but it's dangerous. Arthur studied her carefully. Who are you? She hesitated, then handed him a small flash drive. Everything you need is here, but trust no one. Before Arthur could ask more, she melted back into the mist, leaving him alone with the cold night and the weight of new secrets. Back at the station, Arthur plugged in the flash drive. Files, photos, coded messages, all pointing to a hidden network of conspirators manipulating the city's fate. The game was far from over. Arthur sat in the dim light of his office, the glow from his computer screen casting sharp shadows on the walls. The files on the flash drive unfolded a chilling web. Names, dates, transactions that tied powerful city officials to the killings and the compass symbols. This goes higher than we thought, Arthur murmured. Marlowe leaned over his shoulder. This could bring down half the city. Arthur nodded. But we need proof. Solid evidence. And fast. He reached out to Lydia. Together they mapped connections, cross-referenced alibis, and sifted through lies buried beneath layers of deception. One name stood out. A businessman, Victor Crane, Lydia's estranged father. His empire spanned industries, and whispers suggested he pulled strings behind closed doors. Arthur stared at the photo. This just got personal. That evening, Lydia arrived at Arthur's apartment, resolve etched in her face. We need to confront him, she said, for the city's sake, and for my own. Arthur agreed, knowing the path ahead was fraught with danger. They prepared to face the man at the heart of the storm. Arthur sat across from Lydia in the quiet of his apartment. Maps, documents, and photographs lay scattered around them like pieces of a fractured puzzle. Victor Crane, Arthur said, voice low. He's been hiding in plain sight. But this is the first time we have a direct link. Lydia's eyes hardened. He controlled my life for years. I know how dangerous he can be. Arthur nodded. We'll need a plan. If we walk in unprepared, we'll be swallowed whole. They discussed every detail. The risks, the backup, the timing. Arthur's phone buzzed. It was Marlowe. Sir, we've picked up unusual activity near Crane's estate. Security's on high alert. Arthur rubbed his temples. Looks like they know we're coming. Lydia stood, determination blazing in her eyes. Then we have to be smarter. As night fell, Arthur and Lydia gathered what they needed. The city's fate hung on their next move. The night was thick with tension as Arthur and Lydia approached Victor Crane's sprawling estate. The iron gates loomed ahead, guarded and unyielding. Security looks tighter than I expected, Arthur murmured, scanning the perimeter. Lydia tightened her grip on the flashlight. We don't have a choice. We need answers. They slipped through shadows, avoiding patrols and cameras, inching closer to the mansion's heart. Inside, the air was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the secrets it held. Arthur's phone buzzed quietly. A text from Marlowe. Back up in place. Watch your six. They moved cautiously through the grand hallway, the faint sound of voices ahead. Victor Crane stood before them, flanked by men in suits, his expression calm but unreadable. Well, Detective Wren and Lydia, to what do I owe this pleasure? His voice was smooth, but the danger beneath was clear. Arthur stepped forward. We know about the killings, the symbols, the conspiracy. Victor smiled thinly. You're chasing ghosts. Lydia's voice was steady. We're here to end your game. Victor's smile faded, replaced by a cold glare. You have no idea what you're meddling in. The city thrives on balance. Without me, it falls apart. Arthur's eyes narrowed. Balance built on blood isn't balance. It's chaos disguised as order. Victor stepped closer, voice low but fierce. You think you're heroes. You're pawns in a game far bigger than you realize. Lydia's jaw tightened. No more pawns. We're ending this tonight. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from the corridor. Men in suits moved to flank Arthur and Lydia. Marlowe's voice crackled in Arthur's earpiece. Backups in position. Hold tight. Arthur drew his badge. You're under arrest, Crane. Victor laughed bitterly. Arrest me. You'll never stop the movement. As officers flooded the room, Arthur and Lydia exchanged a glance. The fight wasn't over, but a pivotal battle had been won. Victor Crane was led away in cuffs, his expression unreadable, but his eyes burning with unspoken threats. The room settled into a heavy silence, broken only by the distant hum of police radios. Arthur exhaled deeply. One man down, but I'm not convinced it's over. Lydia nodded, her voice softer now. He's been protecting something. Maybe someone. This was just the surface. Marlowe approached, holding a file. We found something in Crane's office. A ledger with names, high-ranking officials, people we never suspected. Arthur flipped through the pages. The list was staggering. This goes deeper than we thought, he murmured. We need to follow these trails carefully. Lydia placed a hand on his shoulder. We will. Together. As dawn broke over the city, Arthur realized the real hunt was just beginning. The first light of dawn seeped through the blinds as Arthur and Lydia sat side by side, studying the ledger. Each name was a thread, weaving a network of influence that reached far beyond the killings. Arthur rubbed his temples. These people, politicians, business moguls, even some law enforcement, they've been covering for each other. Lydia's eyes flickered with resolve. We have to expose them all. If we don't, the city will never be safe. Arthur nodded, feeling the weight of their task pressing down like a storm on the horizon. We'll need solid proof, wiretaps, surveillance, witnesses willing to talk. This is going to get messy. Lydia leaned forward. Then let's get to work. Outside, the city stirred awake, unaware that its fate now rested in the hands of two determined souls. Arthur and Lydia moved quietly through the precinct, coordinating with trusted officers who hadn't been compromised. The plan was simple, but dangerous. Infiltrate the network, gather irrefutable evidence, and dismantle the conspiracy from within. Arthur whispered into his phone. We need surveillance on Crane's known associates. Every call, every meeting. Lydia tapped away on her laptop, pulling up blueprints and schedules. I'm setting up wiretaps in 3 locations. Should have something within 24 hours. The tension was palpable. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every knock, a warning. Hours turned into days, and the pieces slowly began to align. Secret meetings, coded messages, and backdoor deals revealed a city under siege by greed and fear. Arthur caught himself glancing over his shoulder more often, the line between friend and foe blurring with each passing moment. But they pressed on, because the truth was worth the risk. Late into the night, Lydia's laptop pinged softly. Arthur, you need to hear this. Arthur leaned in, listening intently as a conversation played through the speakers. Low voices discussing a shipment scheduled for the docks, coded references to the compasses, and making the final move. Arthur's jaw tightened. This is it, the next step in their plan. Lydia's fingers flew over the keyboard. I'm tracking the meeting location now. If we act fast, we can catch them in the act. Arthur grabbed his coat. Gather the team. We're moving out. The city's fog curled around them as they headed toward the docks, every step bringing them closer to a showdown that could finally break the cycle. The docks were shrouded in mist, the only sounds the distant lapping of water and the soft hum of cargo machinery. Arthur and Lydia, along with a small team, moved silently among the crates, eyes sharp and ears alert. Target should arrive any minute, Lydia whispered, checking her watch. Arthur's hand rested near his holster, muscles coiled like springs. Stay sharp. These people don't hesitate. Suddenly, headlights pierced the fog, a black van creeping toward the loading area. Figures emerged, moving with practiced precision, unloading crates marked with the compass symbol. Arthur signaled the team. On my mark. Now. Officers sprang from their hiding spots, weapons drawn. Chaos erupted as the suspects scattered, but Arthur's focus zeroed in on a tall man in a dark coat, the figure they'd been chasing all along. The man tried to flee, but Arthur was faster. Stop! Police! He shouted, tackling the man to the ground. Breathing heavily, Arthur looked down at the captive. You're done. The interrogation room was cold and unforgiving, lit by a single overhead lamp that cast harsh shadows on the suspect's face. Arthur sat across the table, his voice calm but firm. Start talking. Who are you working for? What's the end game? The man, disheveled but defiant, sneered. You think catching me stops anything? The city's always had its secrets. We're just the ones who uncovered them. Arthur leaned in. You've left a trail. Symbols, notes, compasses. Why? The suspect's eyes flickered. It's a map, a key to something bigger, something you don't want to find. Lydia watched silently from the corner, tension thick in the room. Arthur pressed on. Where is it? What are you trying to unlock? The man's lips curled into a faint smile. You'll find out soon enough, detective. The real game is just beginning. Arthur's grip tightened on the chair. The weight of the mystery deepened. Arthur stepped out of the interrogation room, the suspect's cryptic words echoing in his mind. Lydia joined him, her expression grim. The real game is just beginning, she repeated quietly. We need to find out what he meant. Arthur nodded. The symbols, the compasses, they're part of a larger puzzle. We need to map every clue we have. Back in the precinct, they spread out all the evidence, photos, notes, locations, on a large table. Arthur traced the compass symbol, connecting dots on a city map. Each victim, each symbol, points to specific places around the city, he said. It's a scavenger hunt of sorts. Lydia frowned. But for what? And who's at the end of it? Arthur's eyes met hers. That's what we have to find out. They prepared for a long night, determined to follow the trail wherever it might lead. Hours passed as Arthur and Lydia pored over the map, tracing the lines connecting the compass symbols scattered across the city. Each location had something in common: historical significance, hidden passageways, old landmarks long forgotten. Lydia tapped a finger on the table. Look here. These points form a path, almost like a secret route through the city. Arthur's eyes lit up. If we follow this path, it might lead us to whatever they're trying to protect or expose. They decided to investigate the first location at dawn, a forgotten subway station sealed off years ago. As they descended into the cold, dark tunnels, the silence was thick, broken only by the faint echo of their footsteps. Arthur's flashlight beam caught something on the wall, a fresh carving of the compass symbol. This is it, he whispered. We're on the right track. The air in the subway tunnel was damp and heavy, carrying the scent of rust and forgotten years. Arthur's footsteps echoed softly against the cracked concrete walls, his flashlight cutting through the darkness like a beacon. Lydia moved cautiously beside him, eyes scanning every shadow. Look here, Arthur said, kneeling beside a metal plate partially hidden under debris. He pried it open, revealing a narrow passage leading deeper underground. They exchanged a glance. This was no ordinary tunnel. As they ventured further, faint whispers of past secrets seemed to brush past them. The walls were marked with the same compass symbol, now accompanied by cryptic inscriptions. Arthur traced the carvings with his fingers. This isn't just a map, it's a message. Someone wanted these clues found. Lydia's voice was barely a whisper. But why? And by whom? Suddenly, the distant sound of footsteps echoed behind them. They froze, lights scanning the tunnel. We're not alone down here, Arthur said, gripping his flashlight tighter. Arthur and Lydia spun around as the footsteps grew louder, bouncing off the tunnel walls. Shadows moved just beyond the reach of their flashlights. Show yourself, Arthur called, his voice steady but edged with urgency. A figure emerged from the darkness, a man in a hooded coat, his face obscured. Looking for answers, detective? The stranger's voice was low, almost mocking. Arthur stepped forward. Who are you? What is this place? The man smiled thinly. A crossroads. A place where the city's true story begins and ends. Lydia's eyes narrowed. What do you want from us? To see if you're worthy, he replied. The game isn't over, Arthur. It's only just begun. Before they could react, the man vanished into a side passage, leaving behind only the echo of his footsteps and a chilling promise. Arthur exchanged a glance with Lydia. We're deeper in than I thought. Arthur took a deep breath, steadying himself against the cold concrete wall. We can't let him distract us. Whatever this place is, it holds the answers. Lydia nodded, determination flaring in her eyes. We follow the path, wherever it leads. They continued down the tunnel, the compass symbols growing more frequent and intricate. The inscriptions hinted at a forgotten history, a secret society that once ruled the city from the shadows. As they rounded a corner, a small chamber opened up before them. In the center stood a weathered pedestal, upon which rested an ancient-looking box, adorned with the same compass emblem. Arthur approached slowly. This has to be it. He reached out, lifting the lid carefully. Inside lay a collection of letters, old photographs, and a map marked with locations far beyond the city. Lydia picked up a letter, reading aloud. To those who seek the truth, follow the path, and uncover the legacy left behind. Arthur's eyes met hers. This is bigger than we thought. This goes back decades. Suddenly, their radios crackled. Detective Wren, you need to get back. Something's happened. Arthur closed the box, pocketed the letters, and they hurried back toward the surface, the weight of the mystery heavier than ever. The climb back to the surface was hurried, the chill of the underground giving way to the sharp night air. Arthur's radio buzzed again, urgency clear in Marlowe's voice. Detective, you need to get here fast. There's been another incident. One of the victims' families is causing a scene. Arthur frowned. What happened? Crowds getting restless. They're demanding answers. And there's been a break-in at the precinct. Someone's tampered with the evidence locker. Lydia's eyes widened. They're trying to derail the investigation. Arthur's jaw tightened. We can't let that happen. Let's move. Arriving at the precinct, they found chaos. Officers struggling to control a growing crowd outside, and inside the evidence room was ransacked. Files were scattered, and a few key pieces of evidence were missing. Arthur scanned the damage, his mind racing. This isn't just a threat, it's a warning. Lydia looked at him. We're dealing with someone who's always one step ahead. Arthur clenched his fists. Then, we have to be smarter. We keep pushing, no matter what. Arthur and Lydia retreated to his office, the weight of the precinct's chaos settling around them like a storm. We need to secure what's left, Arthur said, rubbing his temples. But more than that, we need to figure out who's behind the break-in. Lydia nodded, pulling out her notebook. It's someone with access, insider knowledge. Arthur paced, the city's distant hum a reminder of what was at stake. We have to go back to the basics, re-examine every lead, every person who's crossed this case. He stopped, eyes sharp. And we need to protect the families of the victims. They're vulnerable, and this killer is using their pain to manipulate us. Lydia looked up, determination burning. We can't let fear stop us. Arthur smiled faintly. No, we're getting closer. I can feel it. He reached for the map and letters they'd recovered, spreading them out. Tomorrow we follow the path again. But this time, we do it with backup. The night stretched on, a silent promise that the hunt was far from over. Morning light filtered through the blinds as Arthur and Lydia gathered their gear. The precinct was quieter now, the tension replaced by a focused urgency. "We're not just chasing a killer," Arthur said, folding the map carefully. "We're chasing a ghost, a shadow that slipped through every crack." Lydia checked her phone. "I've arranged for a small tactical team to accompany us. Discreet, but ready," Arthur nodded. "Good. We'll need every edge we can get." They set out to revisit the marked locations, each step measured, every glance alert. As they moved through the city, Arthur couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were watching them, that the killer was still always just ahead. At the third location, a crumbling old church, they paused. The compass symbol was etched into the stone doorway, fresh and sharp. Arthur ran a gloved finger over it. "We're getting closer. Whatever this is, it's about to reveal itself." Lydia's voice was steady. "We stay sharp. No mistakes." The church's heavy wooden doors groaned as Arthur pushed them open. Dust danced in the shafts of light spilling through broken stained glass windows, casting fractured colors across the cracked stone floor. Lydia's flashlight swept the interior, revealing rows of empty pews and a pulpit draped in cobwebs. "Too quiet," she whispered. Arthur's eyes caught a fresh marking on the pulpit, a compass symbol carved deep into the wood, accompanied by a phrase, "Find the center. Find the truth." His heart quickened. This is it, the center of the map. They moved carefully toward the pulpit, the weight of history pressing down on them. Suddenly, a noise, a faint scraping from the basement stairs. Arthur signaled Lydia to stay alert. Slowly, they descended into darkness, the air growing colder, heavier. At the bottom, they found an old cellar lined with crates and dust-covered relics. But in the far corner, a figure sat huddled, a man with wild eyes and trembling hands. Arthur stepped forward cautiously. "You've been leaving the signs, haven't you?" The man's voice cracked. "I wanted to stop it, but they're coming." Lydia exchanged a look with Arthur. "Who's coming? What is this?" The man's gaze flickered to the shadows behind them. "The game. It's not over." Arthur's grip tightened on his flashlight. "Who are they? What game?" The man swallowed hard, eyes darting nervously. "There's a group, the Navigators. They've controlled the city's secrets for decades, using symbols to mark their territory, their power." Lydia stepped closer. "And the murders? A warning to those who pry too deep. Daniel Mercer, the others. They were threats to the order." Arthur's mind raced. "So this compass symbol, it's their mark." He nodded. "A call to silence, but also a map. A puzzle they want only the initiated to solve." A sudden noise startled them, a faint shuffle behind the crates. Arthur drew his service pistol, signaling Lydia to cover. "Who's there?" Arthur demanded. From the shadows, a figure emerged slowly, hands raised. "Detective Wren, I presume." Arthur's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" The man smiled thinly. "Just someone who wants the truth out." The stranger stepped forward, his face partially hidden beneath a worn hood. "My name is Gabriel. I used to be part of the Navigators." Arthur kept his pistol trained on him, but curiosity flickered in his eyes. "Used to be? Why did you leave?" Gabriel's voice was low, almost a whisper. "Because I couldn't live with the blood on my hands. The murders, they've gone too far." Lydia crossed her arms. "Why come now? Why tell us?" "Because you're close to uncovering the whole truth, and they will stop at nothing to keep it buried." Arthur studied Gabriel carefully. How do we stop them? Gabriel reached into his coat, pulling out a crumpled journal. This contains everything: the locations, the rituals, the names. Arthur took the journal, flipping through the pages filled with coded notes and sketches of the compass symbols. Help me decrypt this, Gabriel urged, before more people die. Arthur nodded slowly. We'll need all the help we can get. Back in Arthur's dimly lit office, the three pored over the journal. The pages were filled with cryptic symbols, maps overlaid with compasses, and strange annotations. Looks like a code, Lydia said, tracing a series of numbers and letters. Gabriel nodded. The navigators communicated through this. It's how they coordinated their moves without outsiders catching on. Arthur leaned back. Any idea what the next target is? Gabrielle's eyes darkened. Yes, they plan to strike during the city's upcoming festival, when everyone will be distracted. Lydia frowned. That's only 2 days away. Arthur's voice was steady, determined. Then we don't have time to waste. We break this code, and we stop them. For hours they worked, the journal slowly revealing its secrets. A pattern pointing to a location deep within the city's oldest district. Arthur's gaze hardened. This is where we find them. Night had fallen when Arthur, Lydia, and Gabriel made their way through the winding streets of the old district. Shadows clung to the crumbling facades, and the occasional flicker of street lights barely cut through the gloom. Gabriel paused in front of an ancient stone building, its heavy doors scarred with the compass symbol. This is it, he whispered, the heart of the navigators. Arthur signaled his team to stay alert as they approached. The air was thick with tension, every sound amplified in the silence. They slipped inside, footsteps echoing on the cold stone floor. Faint whispers floated through the corridors, voices discussing secrets only a chosen few were meant to hear. Suddenly a door creaked open ahead. Arthur motioned for silence. Inside, a group gathered around a table covered with maps and strange artifacts. At the head stood a tall figure, cloaked in darkness. We've been expecting you, the figure said, voice calm but menacing. Arthur stepped forward. This ends tonight. The figure smiled. Ah, Detective Wren. But the game, it's only just begun. Arthur's eyes scanned the room. The walls were adorned with ancient maps, the compass symbols painted in meticulous detail. Faces emerged from the shadows, members of the navigators, cloaked and silent, watching. The tall figure stepped forward, revealing a sharp jawline and cold eyes. You think you can stop us with a few notebooks and questions? Lydia tightened her grip on her service weapon. We have more than that. We have the law. A faint laugh echoed through the chamber. Law. We exist beyond your laws. We've shaped this city's secrets for generations. Gabriel swallowed, voice trembling. How many more will you kill before this ends? The figure's gaze hardened. Enough to send a message. Arthur stepped closer, voice calm but firm. Your message ends here. We have the evidence. The code is broken. The leader's eyes flickered with something almost like respect. Then, let's see if you can live up to your words. Suddenly, the room erupted into motion, cloaked figures lunging toward them. Arthur drew his weapon, firing precise shots. Lydia covered his flank, while Gabriel backed toward the exit, clutching the journal. The battle was fierce, shadows twisting in the flickering torchlight. When the dust settled, the navigators were subdued, and the tall figure lay restrained. Arthur looked around, breathing hard. It's over. The morning light filtered through the barred windows of the holding cell, where the tall figure sat, silent but defiant. Arthur stood across from him, the weight of the case settling like a quiet fog. "You lost," Arthur said simply. The man's eyes didn't waver. "Perhaps, but secrets never truly die. Others will rise." Arthur shook his head. "Not if we stay vigilant. Your reign ends here." Outside, Lydia and Gabrielle spoke quietly with officers, ensuring the navigator's network was dismantled and their victims remembered. Arthur stepped outside into the fresh air, the city waking around him. The streets no longer seemed quite so shadowed. He lit a cigarette, exhaling slowly. The game ended. For now. Lydia joined him. "Think there'll be more?" Arthur's voice was soft. "There always is. But we keep playing, one step at a time." As the city stirred to life, Arthur Wren felt the familiar ache in his chest, the pull of the next case, the next mystery, waiting just beyond the horizon. And he would be ready. Back in his apartment, Arthur sat by the window, the city sprawling beneath him like a restless sea. The events of the past weeks played over in his mind. Faces, clues, the weight of every life lost. He poured himself a drink, the amber liquid catching the faint glow of the streetlights. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Lydia stepped inside, her expression tired but resolute. "You okay?" she asked. Arthur nodded slowly. "As okay as I can be. This one, it got under my skin." Lydia sat beside him. "It always does." He sighed. The navigators weren't just killers. They were ghosts of the city's past, hiding in plain sight. She glanced out the window. "Think you'll ever stop chasing them?" Arthur smiled faintly. "Maybe when the city stops whispering." They sat together in silence, the night wrapping around them like a shared secret. The game was over for now, but the shadows never truly disappeared. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting long stripes across Arthur's cluttered desk. He sifted through reports, photos, and scribbled notes, pieces of puzzles he was still piecing together. His phone buzzed, a message from Lydia. New case, possible break-in near the harbor. Could be related. Arthur's eyes narrowed. The city's whispers were growing louder. He grabbed his coat, the familiar weight settling over his shoulders. As he stepped outside, the crisp air greeted him, a reminder that every day brought new shadows to chase, new mysteries to unravel. Arthur Wren was ready. Because in a city like this, the story never truly ends. Arthur arrived at the harbor just as the sun rose, casting a pale glow over the water. The scene was quiet but tense. Police tape cordoning off a small warehouse, officers milling about with serious expressions. Lydia greeted him with a nod. "Break-in last night. Nothing stolen, but the security system was disabled. Someone knew exactly what they were doing." Arthur crouched to examine the shattered lock. No signs of forced entry. Inside, "We found this," Lydia said, handing him a small folded piece of paper. On it was another symbol, a variation on the compass motif, but this time with 4 dots surrounding it. Arthur's brow furrowed. The game's not over. They exchanged a look, both knowing this was the start of something new, but somehow connected. Arthur stood, determination hardening his gaze. "Let's find out what they're after." Arthur and Lydia pored over the new symbol, comparing it to the previous ones. The dots seemed like markers, points on a map, but unlike before, This one felt like a warning. Someone's signaling us, Arthur said it quietly. They want to be found. That night, Arthur revisited the old map he'd pieced together from the compass symbols. The new one fit neatly into the pattern, forming a shape, an arrow pointing toward the city's old lighthouse. It's a meeting place, Lydia said, or a final message. Arthur nodded. We'll go there at first light. The next morning, the two arrived at the lighthouse. Its weathered stone stood silent against the sky, the air thick with anticipation. Inside, they found a small gathering, a mix of confused followers and a few navigators left behind, desperate for answers. In the center stood a frail old man, eyes full of sorrow. This was never about killing, he said softly. It was about guiding, about revealing the city's truth. Arthur's voice was steady. Truths don't need bloodshed. The man bowed his head. Perhaps you're right. As the sun rose over the harbor, Arthur felt the weight of the case lift slightly. The game was over. The city could begin to heal. Arthur stood outside the lighthouse as dawn broke, the first light spilling over the water like a promise. The case was closed, but the city still breathed its endless stories, whispers of secrets, shadows of past deeds. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling upward, dissolving into the morning air. Lydia joined him silently, sharing the quiet moment. Think it's really over? She asked. Arthur took a slow drag, then exhaled. For now. But in a city like this, peace is just a pause between storms. He looked out over the harbor, watching the city awaken, its people, its mysteries, its endless pulse. And somewhere deep inside, Arthur felt that familiar pull, the call of the next story waiting to be told. He smiled faintly. Sleep well, city. I'm still listening. With that, Arthur turned and walked away, ready for whatever came next.